Hello, everybody. This is Lee Miltier. I am very honored today to be able to be with you and to introduce you to the Renegade Time Management Program. This, of course, is the information from Dan Kennedy. And Dan, please say hello to the group.
Well, glad to be on the phone and have you with us.
I want to start today with something of a challenge for you. Why should people pay attention to the way you set and achieve goals, manage your time, and control your work, especially given that some of your ideas and methods are radically different from what we know in the mainstream world?
Well, the radically different issue, when I talk to people about advertising and marketing, I'm always telling them if you've got a small company or an entrepreneurial business, you dare not pay attention to and blindly emulate what really big companies are doing with their advertising. And similarly, if you're an entrepreneur and you are listening to this because you're interested in being more productive, the last thing that's going to be of much help to you is time management methodology or tools or systems that have been developed predominantly to be sold to executives and middle managers who spend their lives in cubicles on something of a 9-to-5 schedule. And for the most part, if they do 4 things in a day, they think they've had a big day. And so you see a lot of time management training, and over the years, I've produced programs for companies in the time management business. A couple of people who've had best-selling books have been clients of mine, and I've got sort of a fetish about it. So, I probably own 200 time management books and tape sets, and have seen pretty much everything that comes down the pike. And for the most part, it is built for somebody who, quite frankly, isn't doing much. And so, they have neatly organized, color-coded file systems, and I don't want to mention any brand names, but they're neat little time management books with tab dividers and color-coded pens. And unfortunately, in the entrepreneurial world, a lot of that stuff breaks down pretty quickly. So my premise has always been that if you want really different or extraordinary or exceptional results, then you're not going to get those with normal methods. And it applies to time just as it applies to anything else. I guess my answer to the credentials question would be, this product has happened, and the No BS Time Management book happened because so many people ask me about how in the devil I get so much done.
Now, most of these people would be entrepreneurs that have asked you this?
Yeah. I have very few corporate environment clients anyway. But, yeah, most of this comes from entrepreneurs and marketing people who come to have an awareness, particularly those that are clients of mine or in my coaching groups, and they come to have an awareness of the quantity, I suppose qualities for another time and another day, but the quantity of output, the quantity of work that I do with one support person and only one support person, and they're sort of intrigued by that, and they're intrigued by the ways in which I limit the access to me. And so, if you hand somebody a month just a list of any one month's written work, setting aside almost everything else. I do 3 newsletters a month. As a copywriter, I'm doing 5 to 10 major client projects a month. I'm writing advertising and sales letter and that kind of copy, as well as product for the businesses I'm involved in. I'm averaging 4 to 6 one-day consultations a month. I've got 72 people in coaching groups require a little bit of attention. I've had at least one book a year published for the last decade, and stepped up the pace a little bit last year and going into next year. I still speak on the average of once a month, and for that and the consulting and the coaching groups, I'm traveling now only 4 to 5 days a month, but still, and day-to-day business stuff and managing the money and fooling around with the racehorses. And people look at all that, and it looks to them like 3 people's workload
for a year. For a year.
Yeah. And so people are interested in that. They're interested in what we talked about in the Renegade Millionaire System, the whole issue of autonomy, the fact that I have re-engineered my business life several times to enable me to be where I want to be and work only with who I want to be, working when I want, how I want, and so forth. And so, if people are interested in or envious of those sorts of things, then they ought to look at the methods that I use. And it's quite common, by the way. I had a client here a couple of weeks ago, and he expressed a literal envy. He said, "Geez, I sure wish I could operate my business life like you do, and pretty much get everybody to come to me and go all day long, literally without interruption, by phone or fax or in person." He was astounded that he was here for the entire day, and of course we were not interrupted once. And he says, "I just wish I could do that." And I proceeded to quickly tell him how he could do that, and of course then he was unwilling to do any of the things that were necessary, in order to do it. But there is a method to this madness, and it is usable by people other than me.
And for anyone who hasn't been really a raving fan of yours for a long time, they don't really know from that list that you just talked about that you say you're only speaking about once a month. But you used to speak, 10 times a month?
Well, my peak, not quite that bad. My peak years were between 60 and 80 engagements a year.
And you still maintained...
Still pretty much did much this same load. A little less copywriting for clients and a little less consulting, but pretty much the same load. Plus, for a number of those years, I also still had our mail order business for all of my information products, which I sold in 1999, and at one time, for a number of those years, 5 employees in that business, and I had the Inner Circle newsletter business, which I sold to Bill Glazer last year. So, I did for almost a decade, 9 years, manage all of that while still being on the road 100 plus days a year. On average, you figure every speaking engagement is really 2 to 2.5 days of travel, depending on how efficiently you organize all that. Today, it'd be 4 days for everyone, but in our post 9/11 world. But it's actually a real luxury to be stationary in one place for 8, 9, 10, 12 days at a time.
Dan, one of the feedbacks I got from the Renegade Millionaire System that we did last year was that most people basically decided that you were superhuman, or they insisted that their business is so different from yours and that your radical methods won't work for them. When you hear this, and I'm sure you have, how do you respond to that?
Well, I get the latter more often than I do the former. But to knock that one out, there's no genetic disposition or magic gene that I'm aware of anybody documenting for.
Wouldn't that be nice to bottle?
Yeah, a pill you could take to be super productive. Well, there is, but they
I think that's illegal.
Addictive side effects.
That's right.
That's the Desperate Housewives episode with everybody gulping down the kids' ADD medicine.
Right.
But there's nothing inherently special about me that makes me any more productive by instinct or a genetic advantage than anybody else. And as far as my business is different thing, I mean, that unfortunately is the knee-jerk excuse that pops out of everybody's subconscious mind and then their mouth for not doing all sorts of effective things. And so it's exactly the same thing that is said about the type of advertising and marketing that I teach that is the same thing said about the time management methodology that I use is the person who immediately wants to insist that their circumstances are different. In fact, we're now sort of joking about it because what happens in question and answer sessions at events, I noticed at the last super conference, 3 different people asked questions of different people. Each one, and Bill had the huge "but my business is different" poster up on the wall.
Bill Glazer,
yeah. And each one began their question like this: I probably shouldn't say this, but my business is different.
I was there. I heard that.
Into the question,
Right.
And why? I mean, look, all businesses have the same fundamental functions in common. They have either a customer or a client or a patient. They provide either a good or a service or both. They may go to the customer location or bring the customer to their location. They have to have some method of attracting new ones and some method of selling repeatedly to and keeping the ones that they already have. And so the differences between the cosmetic dentistry practice and the manufacture of widgets that go inside windshield wiper cases to the furniture store, the differences are really very, very small and very nominal. The commonalities are much greater. And most of my approach to time and to communication and to customer and client management has a lot more to do, first of all, with the individual's attitude and the individual's decisions about all this, and then with universal principles that it does with things that can be said to be business specific. Everybody thinks that their customers or clients can't be trained. Everybody thinks that in their business they have to be immediately and constantly accessible. And in industry after industry where these beliefs are religion, at least one person, and in many cases many, who have initially skeptically begun to adopt some of the same things that I do, have proven that wrong. I mean, we have in my one coaching group, we have a commercial realtor who deals with apartment buildings and commercial properties and investors. And if you got a room full of those realtors together, they would all argue that you've got to take the call when the call comes. Certainly if somebody is investing hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars with you, they're going to insist on having your cell phone number and be able to call you day or night. You've got to go meet with every one of these prospects, and yet my guy's doing exactly the opposite, and in fact making the new client jump through hoops, fill out a form, and pay money before he can even have a telephone conversation with him. In the mortgage industry, Tracy, of course, as you know, deals exclusively with residential realtors who all hold open houses on weekends, and all, of course, think as soon as they have somebody who might want to make an offer, they need to be able to get on the phone to their mortgage person. And Tracy makes a very high six-figure income in the mortgage business, and turns the cell phone off every day at 5 o'clock and turns the cell phone off on the weekend and does not check messages and does not return calls and trains his realtors to do business with him in that way. And I could go industry by industry by industry by industry and give you example after example. In each of those cases, the majority of the people in those businesses would insist that they could not possibly use my methods.
Well, with everything that you said, I mean, that all is boiled down to the mindset of what they've learned in the past, that they have to be there for everybody's whims. And so what you're teaching in this program basically is an entirely different renegade type of mindset, right?
Well, yeah, it definitely starts with the decisions you make about how you're going to do business and how people are going to do business with you, and what kind of value you are going to place on your time. And, you know, one of the things that I think people really need to get a grip on is that at times the only asset they've got that can't be replaced and replenished. Prospects, in most cases, there's pretty much an unlimited number of them. And any one customer, client, or patient prospect who goes by the wayside is quite easily replaced with another. Clients or customers are equally replenishable and replaceable. If they weren't, everybody would be out of business almost as fast as they got into business, because there's inevitable customer and client loss. I mean, everybody has customers or clients or patients who move away, who die, whose brother-in-law gets in the business and they decide to go do business with them. Everybody, no matter how good a job they do, loses some customers and clients every year, and they obviously figure out how to replace those. So replacing one or two more that are lost because of the way you choose to do business, no big deal. Money's replaceable, of course. Physical assets, building burns down, tornado, hurricane, flood, tsunami, pestilence, et cetera. People replace physical things all the time. The only thing that you can't replenish is the minute we just used. You can't. That's gone, and it is gone forever. And so the mindset has to be about protecting that asset as the most precious and valuable asset that there is.
For those who haven't listened to the Renegade Millionaire System, when you first sent me the room load of materials to go through, in fact, there's a picture of me with all those materials on your website, I remember thinking I was going to faint. You sent almost that much of the mountain of your work that you had done on time management to be going back, I guess it was 25 years. And I have to tell you, I was a little surprised at just how consistent you've been, that whole time that you've been writing about and speaking about time management. So the question is, what has changed most in your thinking or practices about time that you know now that you didn't know, say, 10, 15 years ago?
Actually, not a lot has changed, and it's nuance changes. It's another one of those things that a lot of people, when they are first exposed to the way that I conduct business and the way that I manage time, I get well, of course you can do that now because you're established and you have reputation and you're rich and famous. But I'm starving and poor and nobody knows who I am and I'm just starting out. And so, again, my situation is different. And there's a great story in psychocybernetics of Max Maltz waiting for his first patient call, sitting in his cosmetic surgery office with the phone, desperately waiting for it to ring, and then having to exert massive self-control not to immediately invite the person in the next hour because obviously there were no appointments. And pretty much everything that I do now, I was doing long before any sane person would think that I could financially afford to do it. And incidentally, the exact opposite is true. Most of the time management and time protection and time value and productivity methods that I use actually increase the desire of the marketplace. They don't suppress it. They actually help marketing. They don't hurt it. But anyway, there's really not much that's different. I've gotten more extreme.
Yes, you have. I've known you a long time. You have.
And a little bit of that is a reflection purely of supply and demand, that as you get better and better and better at multiplying the demand so that it legitimately far exceeds the supply of you and your time that is available, you become emboldened. Some of it, though, is purely the result of experience, discovering that you can. And, I still underestimate, as extreme as many people think that I am, I still underestimate how extreme you can be, what you can get away with, what you can demand of people, and how you can train people to respond to you in the way that you want to. So I guess I've gotten more extreme. I've certainly gotten more passionate about it at age 50. I think you naturally look at it a little differently than you do at age 25. And so there's more of a sense of a limited supply of the time, and tolerance for it being wasted and abused is less.
Do you still have that life clock that tells you how many hours and days you have left?
Yeah, you can preset it based on whatever you decide your life expectancy number is, and
that's quite intimidating, actually.
It counts down. Yeah, I'm sure it will reach a point where it, gets turned to the wall. But yeah, I'm very sensitive and have made myself extremely sensitive. And I guess the other thing I would say that the change really over the years has not been so much in what I do and how I do it, but in the need I see to do it, and the need for other people to do it. I mean, we've gone from, I built my businesses over many years before, when FedEx was a novelty, and then fax, and about the fastest thing anybody could do to you then was fax, and I was one of the first people to have one of them things in my office, and some people still didn't have them, and we've gotten to the point now of just instant, constant, and unrelenting communication, and it all puts more pressure on people. On the user side, to some extent, it's a convenience, but the convenience is a bad trade-off, actually, for most people, because the pressure, the quantity of the communication has so multiplied. People have given up, all of their mental recovery time, the little 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there that used to be built into every business day. I half joke. I'm really not. People take it as funny, and it works from the stage as funny, but, it's extremely disturbing to me to be in an airport restroom and see the guy standing at the urinals with one hand on the privates and the other hand holding the cell phone we're talking into. And, the four people leave an office to walk down the street to go to lunch, instead of talking to each other and giving themselves a little breather, they're all on their cell phones, all the way down in the elevator, all the way out the door, all the way down the sidewalk, all the way into the restaurant. You see them trying to do two things at the same time, where they're talking on the cell phone and talking to the clerk at the counter they're ordering something from. And so all the recovery time's gone. And it's clearly causing a lot of, what I call brain overload. And people are making mistakes. And so for all of these reasons, I think it's become increasingly important to take a different approach to how you control your time and how you control access. So, what I was doing 10 and 15 years ago, I'm only doing more so and more rigid about, and am finding people that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, shook their heads and wanted to hear nothing about it are now asking how they can do it too. And it's a representation of the fact that they've just reached the point of overload.
Do you also think that because we're so accessible to oftentimes customers and clients that they catch us off guard and we make mistakes or we agree to things because we haven't had time to think about it?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's no virtue in thoughtless response. And there's an enormous amount of that goes on. And I very rarely catch myself doing it, but I catch myself from time to time. And almost every time that I do it, I get myself into trouble. By that I mean agreeing to something that with careful thought you wouldn't have agreed to exactly the way you just did.
And that's often because a lot of times we want to please our clients or make people happy, and I know I'm guilty of it.
Well, I think it's that. I think it's, there's a whole range of marketing issues around the issue of commoditization. But I think even more so than that, it's what you said. It's the person has not a millisecond to give it any thought. And because of the constant and instant access, the person has not only gotten to them perhaps at an inopportune time, but they've gotten to them, and they've gotten to them with no advance notice. But they've gotten to them when they were trying to do something else with those 5 minutes. And now they're rushing through the conversation. And so the kind of mistakes, the agreeing to things you shouldn't agree to get made, temperamental responses occur, the nerves are frayed, and that person senses it and hears it. The same thing with email, by the way. It's not even just the phone. It's the constant access and the expectation that thing's going to be answered instantly, and people choose to answer them instantly. And so there's all this communication happening in the business environment into which is going very little thought. And it's actually a very dangerous thing.
Well, I've learned from you to basically return calls and not answer calls anymore, if I can help it. Let me ask you this, because this is, while you're talking, has really, I've got this question in my head about, basically, when did you first begin to develop your ideas and your approach on the whole time management thing and being in this renegade, different from everybody else mindset, and make them, come to you versus you go to them kind of thought?
I tell people, and we talked about it in the Renegade Millionaire System. I mean, the first, whatever term you want to use for this stuff, self-improvement, personal development, success education, the first stuff I ever encountered was the old original Earl Nightingale Lead the Field program. And the thing that, out of everything that was on those recordings, and I got them, by the way, when they were on records, which I always then have to
explain what a record is.
If this was a visual media right now, I would be shaping my hands roughly the size of a record, and I would be explaining to people that there was this
a big frisbee
plastic thing. Yeah. But the thing that stuck with me, that so validated what I was already thinking but had no validation for it, that Earl said was that if you were setting out to do something, and it almost mattered not what that was, and you had no successful role models or examples, and had to figure it out without such a person to observe or look at or study or have mentor you or learn from. All you would have to do would be to look at what the majority was doing and start by doing the opposite. And you would pretty much be headed in the right direction, because the majority's always wrong, and they are especially always wrong about money. The statistical proof of that being, of course, that the overwhelming majority of the people have none, never get any, and finish their lives without it. To the extent that, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but it's something like 90% of the teenagers have more money in their bank accounts than 90% of the 65-year-olds in America.
Oh my goodness!
And I could be off a little bit on the percentage, but the concept is accurate. And so the general concept is, and it's been a governing principle for me ever since, is that if you don't know what's right, you can certainly figure out what's wrong just by looking at what everybody's doing. And it's certainly true in my other disciplines, in advertising and marketing. And so I sort of began applying that intentionally and deliberately to everything that I did. And it wasn't very long into doing business that it became apparent to me that the way most people handled their time was pretty much the same way they handled their money, and that it had to be wrong. It clearly was not effective. Now, it took me longer to figure out what the alternatives were, but it became very, very clear to me in the early 70s, and with my first and only job being judged woefully unemployable, and correctly so.
Well, isn't that a good thing for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it actually was extremely helpful. I mean, it's the,
It clears up the problems.
Yeah, it limits the options dramatically.
That's right. The bridge is burned. You have to keep forward.
But in that job, I was a territory sales rep with 5 states. And they did what most companies do. They get you hired, and then they send in one of their grizzled pros from the other territory to live with you for a week and teach you the ropes. And, by the way, the guy was very good at teaching me every imaginable way to cheat on your expense account. Which
is another seminar.
Yeah, especially if you happen to own the company or be in management.
That's correct.
It was just abundantly clear to me, looking at him and then talking to the other reps, just the way they managed, how they went into their territory and who they called on. And I mean, the mechanism was go to a city and go to all the accounts and walk in. And that's still the mechanism, by the way. Most territory salespeople who sell to retail, and so I was calling on bookstores and gift stores and toy stores and so forth. They go from city to city in their territory with their sample case in their hand, and they march in unannounced and present themselves. And it just, that's the way you do this. Here's your computer printout, and if you go to Ann Arbor on Tuesday, you take all the accounts in Ann Arbor, and you try and kind of efficiently route yourself with a map ahead of time, and then you just appear. And it was like 2 weeks into this when I figured out, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why not have appointments? And the answer to that, by the way, was if you try and set appointments in advance, they won't agree to see you, which my logic then said, if they don't want to see me, why do I want to go see them anyway?
Right.
I'd rather go see somebody who wants to see me, or we're saying the wrong things to get them to want to see us, right? And so pretty quickly, my mechanism began sending mail ahead of time, and of course saying I'm going to be in Ann Arbor on Tuesday, and here's the way I've routed myself. And I'll be coming to see you at 10, and I'm going to see Joe at 11, and I'm going to see Charlie at 12, and I'm going to see Mary at 1, and so expect me. And I called it forced appointment setting. And so now I saw 80% of the people I went to see, and as near as I could tell, the average rep was seeing 20% of the people that he wanted to see, that he went to see. And consequently, for that and a number of other reasons, I very quickly was outselling everybody to the point that the sales manager was asking me to take Fridays off because I was making everybody else look bad. I'm serious.
I'm sure you are.
But, so Nightingale's principle, I mean, if you buy into that concept, it too is a great life simplifier. Because anytime you're looking at a crowd, at a group, at an industry norm, at the way things are done by this group, you start out by figuring that if the majority of them are doing it that way, there's a better way. And with time, I mean, this is how you know that things like walking around umbilical cord connected to your cell phone is wrong. You don't have to know what's right to know that it's wrong purely by observing the fact that everybody's doing it. You know that being constantly and easily and indiscriminately accessible is wrong. Even if you had no idea what the right answer was, you could figure out that was wrong. Pretty much everybody has become email obsessed. They check it 12 times a day. That's why Starbucks and restaurants and car dealership waiting rooms and doctor waiting rooms all have internet access. It's so everybody can be checking their email all the time. And if you look around and you see that that's what everybody does, you don't have to know what's right to know that has to be wrong. And if you equate time to money, which in business that's precisely what it is, and in fact, more so, it's actually the leverage to money. And you know that the majority of the people are wrong about money, you have to logically conclude they're wrong about time. And then you look at their behavior and you know that it is ineffective. And you have to go in search of alternative methods. And so very early I was going in search of and figuring out alternative methods.
I've been in your office a number of times, and I've noticed that you have all of your win photos with your horses, and that your win, you're driving races on the wall, and there's always an empty picture frame hanging up there. What's that all about?
Well, it's a strategy that, in that particular context, has not been working all that well lately.
But it has worked. It has worked, right?
Yeah. It's it's a psychological device. It's from the first person I heard of doing it was Arnold Palmer, and Arnold for I believe his entire career. He had big. They get when they win a golf tournament. Well, because of Cliff. Well, you might not know. Come to think of it, because I said win a golf tournament. When they win a golf tournament. Actually, nobody I know who golfs would know this. Jeff wouldn't know this.
No.
When they win a golf tournament, they get like these medallions, and they may get a trophy, they may get a jacket, but they always get, it's sort of a uniformly sized medallion, something akin to an oversized hood ornament. And so Palmer had this giant table in his office in which he would embed these medallions as he got them in its top. And every time he embedded one, he routed out the hole for the next one. The message, of course, being that you are going to get a next one. And so the idea of the empty picture frame on the wall next to the other win pictures is that at some point in time, preferably sooner, not later, I'm going to win another race. And it it's a psychological device, and of course it is an extension of goal setting. And the interesting thing about that is there are even some time management gurus, if you will, past and present, who are actually telling people not to set goals.
I have heard that lately, yes.
And
which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, or not to write them down, and certainly not to tell them to anybody. And I think it was all bad advice when I first heard it, and I think it's bad advice now. I think you have to be thinking about the what's next, and you have to be thinking 8-9 steps down the road, both from a stimulus standpoint of making your entire subconscious system interested enough in what's going on to actually do some work, and from a practical standpoint. I mean, you and I have talked privately at my continuous amazement at a number of clients that I work with or coach, entrepreneurs who never seem to see beyond today or tomorrow the next step in a sequence of what they're doing. And a lot of what is in the Renegade Millionaire system about money, the entire future banking process that I discussed there, is about setting goals and actually exerting control, not just over the present, but over the future.
So how could, say, an average person, that is not racing horses and is not playing golf and winning for sure, but I mean, could they set up like a file system for their next big client, or?
Well, the psychological part of this, I mean, can be done, any number of ways. There are people who have. I think you interviewed Les Brown. Les Brown tells the story of writing himself the big check and carrying the check around.
Right, he did. It was very good.
I've a client who has the photographs. They're not like out in the waiting room for display, but he has the photographs of every client who has been worth over $250,000 to him on the wall, and he has the empty picture frame just as I have the empty picture frame.
Oh, that's good.
For the next one.
That's a great one for everybody to use.
So the psychological trigger aspect of this, there's a way to do it, certainly, to figure it out for every business and every occupation and every career. I think the practical extension of it, the practical side of it, is that I find that the millionaire and the multimillionaire, the from scratch millionaire and multimillionaire entrepreneurs that I work with are all constantly writing goals, writing plans, rewriting goals, massaging those goals, constantly doodling and noodling and figuring out what their business is going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, what the bank balance is going to look like, what the lifestyle is going to look like. And I think most people don't spend enough time on that. They don't give enough attention to this real internal level of self-motivation that is necessary. When you set out, if somebody bought these tapes to be super productive, when you set out to be super productive, that requires a different level, not just of skill, and a different set of methods than you use to be routinely and ordinarily productive. It requires a different level of self-motivation.
Well, one of the phrases I keep hearing you say is, what we look at, what we see, since we're self-fulfilling prophecies, what we think about ourselves and what we think, as Napoleon Hill says, always comes true. And since people aren't envisioning what they want to happen in the future, they're pretty much reacting to life.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right. I use that language a lot. I mean, I sit with clients, and usually even in a full day of consulting, while they want to dive into the nitty-gritty mechanics of what it is that they're doing, I usually back them up, and I will usually talk with them about, tell me what you want your business to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. What you want your business life to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. Because as we know from abundant research and from Dr. Maltz's work, the subconscious mind operates with pictures. It translates language and words and written instructions into mental images. And so when you're setting up your targets, if you will, what you're going to and what you want to be pulled to, you need to do it in visual terms. And it also, it forces people to think in a different way. When I ask you, what do you want your business to look like 5 years from now, your mind immediately does something differently for you than if I say, tell me what you want your sales to be 5 years from now. Tell me what you want your bank balance to be 5 years from now, or your balance sheet. And so it does different things. But you're absolutely right. I mean, look, most people are almost entirely reactive, and not setting goals, by the way, and not precisely and tightly managing your time and your day allows you to be that. And so most people are getting up in the morning and going to work. And for the most part, they are going to work with very little preconceived idea of what is supposed to be accomplished that day, what's supposed to happen, how it's supposed to happen. Very little preconceived structure. If you take most people who've been through any of the popular time management seminars and have come out the other end with one of these whiz-bang notebooks with the tabs and the pages and the colored pens, and the pages are typically divided into 15-minute or 10-minute or even 5-minute little increments. If you get a hold of most of them, you're going to find they got 4 or 5 things on them for the whole day. And if they're using to-do lists or some variation thereof, there's not a lot happening there either. And so, most people have a system that's overbuilt for what they're actually doing, and they start the day by just showing up. And when you do that, other people and events take over. And nature abhors a vacuum. And so if you leave a vacuum, something's going to fill it. And then you get to spend all day and all week and all month reacting to whatever the hell fills it. And sort of one of the first tenets of really being exceptionally productive is to break that cycle.
Dan, both of us sort of grew up in the speaking field, and there was a lot of talk about positive thinking and negative thinking, and I know from just reviewing all your stuff that you've written extensively about the fallacy of what you call militant positive thinking. And in your writing, you advise making a list of all the obstacles that you can think of that might be faced when you're trying to reach a goal. Now, my question is, why isn't such a list an exercise in negative thinking, and why do you advise doing it?
Well, you spoke on programs with the late Dr. Peel, as did I. And so, I mean, no disrespect to Norman Vincent Peale. And nor, incidentally, do I invalidate anything he wrote. I invalidate most people's interpretations of what he wrote. But there's another very good book that's hard to find. It's out of print, but and it was written by Dr. Edward Kramer, and the title is The Positive Power of Negative Preparation.
Tell us the author again.
Edward Kramer.
Edward Kramer, okay.
And so The Positive Power of Negative Preparation. The corollary to this, by the way, in selling and in marketing is that a lot of salespeople hope they never hear an objection, and they'll leave one as the elephant in the room, unspoken and unaddressed, out of fear about the whole thing. Whereas in direct response copywriting, where we're selling through media, there is no interaction. And so if you're smart about it, one of the things that you always do is create a list of every possible reason somebody might have for not buying, not responding, from the obvious and the logical and the rational and the reasonable reasons to the goofy and far out and idiotic reasons, and then you make sure you answer them all somewhere in the copy that you write. And the reason you do that is because there are objections. And in selling, it's very, very rare to ever confront a prospect face-to-face or via sales letter or television infomercial or any media that has no objections to the proposition put in front of them. So the reality is the truthful and accurate view of selling is that the prospect has objections. Similarly, the truthful and accurate view about getting anything done is that there are obstacles. And it's very, very rare that you or I are ever going to decide we're going to do something of any significance at all and just sail from point A to its completion without somebody throwing a monkey wrench in the works. And so to pretend that we are, or to refuse to acknowledge that fact, and then be unpleasantly surprised, purely to be able to fly the flag above our desk of positive thinking, to me is silly. I always hesitate to ruin Deadwood for you because you usually watch it on Tuesdays.
That's correct.
But I'll ruin Sunday.
That's okay.
In the last Sunday's episode, the guy shows up in Deadwood. For those people who don't know what Deadwood is, by the way, it's a great entrepreneur show. I mean, you should watch it. It's on HBO.
It's The Sopranos in the 1800s. That's
exactly what it is, yeah. And so it's an old west town that was the last town not to be in the territories, and it's basically a gold mining town, and there's two warring entrepreneurs, and essentially, to a great degree, it is The Sopranos in the Old West. And sort of as a side story, so it really won't ruin the episode for you. The inventor shows up in town in Sunday night's episode with a bicycle. And it's one of the big high, with the front wheel of the bicycle like they did in the 1800s, where it's real high. And nobody's seen one before. He shows up with the bicycle. And so everybody is in awe and is gathered to look at this thing. And somebody proceeds to challenge him that there's no way he can ride that thing through the city without falling over. And this turns into a gambling deal. And so it's like 8-1 against him being able to ride down the main thoroughfare of that city, for those of that town, for those that don't watch the show. This is the Old West in the 1800s. It's dirt and mud and holes and lepers lying in the street and piles of horse dung and, you name it. And the sidewalks are, of course, wood boardwalks, narrow, and usually with stuff in front of the store, there's going to be barrels of something out on the boardwalk, and there's going to be a chair here and a dog sleeping there and whatever. And so the betting begins on him riding through the street. And he wisely creates two wagers, not one riding through the street and the other one riding the same distance down the boardwalk. And at the very end, after the betting has been done and the odds have been set and all the money's been in, he does the, oh, by the way, I'm going to do that after you clear away all the obstacles. So nothing is in my path down the boardwalk. And as I sat there and watched it, I thought it would be great if we could get them to do that with every one of our wagers, where we're going to start a company, and, oh, by the way, somebody else is going to go clear away all the obstacles. That would be cool.
That would.
I would be much more motivated to do a lot of things that I talk myself out of now if that was the case, but it ain't. And to pretend that it is, it's not only foolish, but it's a guaranteed time suck at some point along the way, because the unanticipated, unplanned for, ugly surprise for which you have no plan B and you have no plan C. Charlie Tremendous Jones's quote was, plan on your plan going wrong so you have a second plan and a third plan for when the second one goes wrong, because it will. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be a bigger time suck when it happens than it was to create those plan Bs and plan Cs in the first place. And again, to refuse to do this strategically and intelligently, just to be able to fly the flag of positive thinking, isn't very smart.
Can I just stop you for a second? Because what would you say is the percentage of entrepreneurs who really do have Plan B and Plan C in place?
Well, of new ones who are like becoming entrepreneurs for the first time or launching their first business venture, virtually none. Of experienced ones, surprisingly few, even after getting their nose bloodied repetitively.
And why do you think that is, when it's so obvious that no matter what great plans we make, there are things that will happen that we have no control over?
I think part of it is this: I don't want to be negative.
Okay.
And I don't want to think negatively. And I definitely don't want to voice negativism. And so it is ignoring the 300-pound elephant in the room. I think some of it is they don't want to take the time to do it.
Well, isn't it very naive?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
beyond naive.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
It is stupid. And then there's, the yin-yang theory, the two sides of every coin theory, that every strength is its corresponding weakness. And, one of the great strengths of entrepreneurs is arrogance, is this incredible optimism that says we can, turn mud into buildings, and that we can mold the world to behave as we want it to behave. And it's a great strength, but it has within it a great weakness, and it causes us often to be in the ready, fire, aim mode, to be running headlong toward the brick wall without having bothered to round up some explosives and put on a helmet. And so, it's important to temper that. You see some of the, and of course there are few, but some of the great entrepreneurial partnerships over the years, if you study them, I just had my Walt group at Disney, and so if you paid attention to Walt, there might not have been all of Walt's success without Roy. And Roy was the negative nabob guy in the corner, constantly saying, "Wait a minute, how in the hell we go pay for this?" And what happens when everybody on that ride gets sick? And what happens? And they actually serve a useful purpose. And so when you're by yourself, you kind of need to temper optimism so that it doesn't turn into blind optimism or stupid optimism or arrogance with some planning. And, the worst thing that happens with a plan B is the best thing that happens with a plan B. You don't need it. But better to have it. Kind of like, I don't like small planes anyway. And I think I've only been truly in a private plane with somebody 3 or 4 times in my entire life. But each time I've inquired as to whether we had parachutes, and it was not my intent to use it, but seemed like better to ask the question while we were still on the ground than, when the engines quit at 20,000 feet.
Right.
And so I'm really a very big parachute guy. I mean, I act under the assumption that what I put down on paper probably ain't going to happen exactly the way I planned it. And where is it going to derail? And if it does, how are we going to respond to that?
I guess I've known you close to over 20 years, and I do know that if I ever tell you about my plans, the first thing you do is tell me, well, here's 3 things that can go wrong. Are you prepared for those things? And that's been very beneficial for me, training.
It's not always welcome.
Well,
I don't mean by you. I mean in general.
Oh, no. And, and that's true. Some people, say, make a joke, well, Dan will always tell you what goes wrong. But it's because you will bring up what will go wrong that people will actually have some kind of awareness or plan or something. I mean, I know I don't get on an airplane without knowing if this flight isn't going, what's the next flight?
I do exactly the same thing, and anybody who's traveled extensively, you would think would do that.
Also, you and I both now used to travel at night to go speak in the next city. Now we have to travel in the morning because everything does go wrong. So, I mean, we just assume things go wrong. And if we get there a few hours early, that's great, but we're going to at least get there.
Well, the Murphy's Law thing, the Murphy's Law rules, I mean, everything takes longer than it's expected. It costs more than you budgeted. Somebody screwed up is going to be involved in the process. The vendor who was really good last week will have lost their mind, their best employee this week. All of that stuff's real. And, people treat it as a joke, but it isn't. It's extremely real. And in many respects, the more you're trying to accomplish and the bigger the things are you're trying to accomplish, the more obstacles and monkey-wrenching and incompetence you're likely to encounter. And far better to plan for it in advance than to try and cope with it spontaneously as it occurs.
Well, let me switch gears for a second. As I was going through your stuff, I noticed that in almost every one of the books and tapes and time management that you mention the importance of environment. Somehow, one way or another, you talk about the environment. And I know in the old $1 Million Thinking series, you said that you can't do $1 Million thinking in an environment that makes you feel like a pauper. I know in the Renegade Millionaire, we talked a little bit about peak productivity environment. Why do you think that the environment you work in is so important?
I can work under the worst of circumstances and pretty much block everything out. And so I can write copy in an airport with.
You are amazing. Yes, you can.
8 people sitting around me having the cell phone conversations about their hysterectomies and affairs. And I actually,
or their sex life.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually can hear the conversations and still write copy. But most people can't, and it's not necessarily advisable, even if you have the ability. I mean, you want to give yourself every advantage and edge that you possibly can in order to be as productive as you possibly can. And I've just found that environment is a very, very, very big part of that. And again, there's practical stuff and there's psychological stuff. And even the people that tend to get the practical right tend to ignore the psychological. But But the subconscious mind is more important in all of this than the conscious mind. And so you want to take the trouble to cater to both. And so the psychological stuff is putting yourself into an environment that is conducive to productively doing whatever the job at hand is. And so if you're gonna paint landscapes, you're probably not going to do that with optimum effectiveness in the same physical environment where you would do your bookkeeping. The tasks are completely different, and they warrant totally different environments. And so a lot of people, they don't really get their subconscious minds engaged because they don't really get into the right place to do the work at hand. It's fresh in my mind because we were just at Disney with my wealth coaching group, and we had lunch with two of the Disney Imagineers, which is their language for their, I guess you would call them creative staff. They're responsible for everything from designing and building new attractions to complete parks to figuring out signage that'll actually help people find the restrooms. And the one Imagineer, who's the guy who built a very large company and sold it, I would say he's about my age. So this is not some kid, but when they're going to go into a meeting and work on an attraction, they take a half an hour and go out and they ride a few rides first. And what they're doing is sort of giving the subconscious an opportunity to get in gear with the work at hand. And they're going to do that in a different place than they're going to go work on budgets and forecasts. And so there's the psychological component, and I do it a lot with place, and I do it a lot with what I call psychological triggers, the objects and the photographs and the paintings, the stuff that you see immediately around you in your particular work environment. The practical side of this is, the stuff that you need close by, and a work environment now that facilitates efficiency. I mean, as silly as it is, on one hand, like of all the great Christmas gifts I got from everybody this year, the thing that has contributed most to productivity has been the little plug-in-the-wall coffee warmer thing you set your cup on.
Some people use that as a candle warmer, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how they were originally designed.
Extremely unlikely that I'd be using it as a candle warmer. I actually have electric candles, the ones that plug in the wall and they, you can take them off.
Of course you do.
Of course.
Of course you do.
But
Mr. Romance.
Yeah, well, but I realized after I was using it that I was probably in first thing in the morning, if I'm writing, in a 2-hour span, I was probably getting up and leaving 3 times to go dump half a cup of cold coffee and make another cup of hot coffee. And this little puppy keeps the original cup warm. And so, it's got a treasured place now in the cockpit and in the work environment where I write. And, I mean, I watch people who are really goofy about this from a practical standpoint. I mean, they'll have their thesaurus and their words that sell book and the other reference stuff that they use on a bookshelf that they have to get up out of their chair and walk over in order to get it and bring it back to the desk where they write. And the equivalent, this is probably the year I had my ad agency business, so this is 75, in Akron, Ohio. And I was going to a meeting with the owner of one of the largest ad agencies in Akron, which is a little bit like saying, the world's tallest midget. But, I mean, nevertheless, at the time, this was a big deal. And this guy had a big reputation in town. And we had the meeting on a Saturday. And so I get to his office, and he's out cutting the grass in front of the office building, which in and of itself is off-putting to me.
I would think.
But
doesn't say much for his prosperity mindset.
Well, unless it's your hobby,
yeah.
And you do that. I mean, I tell people, when I moved from here to Arizona, one of the things I really looked forward to, because I'd never been to Phoenix before, was an end to driving around and watching all these imbeciles out cutting their grass. And now coming back, by the way, now they spend their entire weekend shuttling between their yard and Home Depot. So it's like they have a second job. But it always irritated me, because either they're too cheap to pay a neighborhood kid to cut the grass, and their time's got to be worth more than that. It's just silly. And when I got to Phoenix, by the way, they were all out raking their gravel. Same deal. But
hilarious.
So anyway, I get to this guy's office, and he's out cutting the grass, right? And he's almost finished with the little square of grass in front of the office. So I walk over, and he says, "Just be a couple minutes longer." And as we're standing there talking, one of the wheels on the lawnmower comes loose. He then, with me tagging along, he drags the lawnmower, carrying now the loose wheel. He drags the lawnmower all the way into the building and down a hall, all the way to the back of the building, to where there's a little storage area, a little workshop, where there's a wrench with which he puts the wheel back on, and then drags the lawnmower all the way back to the front of the building. By then I decided I didn't want the meeting, because clearly the guy's too big of a bonehead, to do business with. I mean, how about going and getting a wrench? Or better yet, how about, if this is a reoccurring problem, how about either getting the lawnmower fixed by somebody who knows what they're doing, buying a new mower, or having the tool with you when you're out cutting the grass? I mean, there's 48 smarter things to do than what he did, but it's an analogy for the way a lot of people arrange and function, arrange their environments and function in their environments. And if you go to their offices, or you go to their places of business, or you go to their home offices, wherever they work, and you take a look at how they're working, from a practical standpoint, it's incredibly inefficient and not supportive of a productive approach. So I think environment is critically important psychologically and from a practical standpoint. Again, I don't think people give enough thought to it.
This is the end of this CD. Go on now to the next CD.